Hello, and welcome back to yet another kind of NFL video. We're doing something different today. Recently, in the past few days, my man Choose Care took a lot of time to respond to several different videos, mainly draft videos. Um, and he gave a lot of thoughts, a lot of opinions, and quite frankly, I was planning on just taking 10, 15, 20 minutes and responding to each comment with a comment, but then I thought to myself, you know what? If someone takes the time out their day to watch so many of my videos and to give so many of their own personal thoughts and opinions in regards to my videos, why wouldn't I return the favor and take time out to make an entire video going through each comment and my opinions on them and responding to them thoughtfully? Because, I feel like that's a common courtesy. I enjoy having these discussions, especially with people on my own videos and explaining and exploring my thoughts in some more detail. So, shout out to Choose Carefully. I am going to be responding to all of these different comments from these videos, and I'll try and reference which videos these are from specifically. All right, let me bring it up here in a second. And I'll let you guys read the comments at first. I got to bring them up on my phone. So these are in, like I said, these are in response to a lot of my draft videos where I obviously went through and graded each team's draft by division. So this first, let's start left to right. So this first one on the left is in regards to my NFC East draft grades video, and he is obviously referring to the Giants here. Let's just go. I'm bringing up the Giants grades real quick if you all give me just a second here. All right, let's go through. I'll read every comment for you, then I'll just break down each point and respond to it. This Giants draft might change narrative for a while. Yes, they got great value everywhere except the Dart pick. I agree with that. None at any positions they need, though. Let's start with that first point. So they got good value on every single pick except the Jackson Dart selection. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I did say that the Jackson Dart pick was their worst pick in the draft overall. Um, Not any positions of need, though. Well, Abdul Carter, Darius Alexander, you could say it's not a need, right? You could probably say, looking at it, the defensive line was probably the strength of the Giants overall, right? But they just added two young, really good players to a overall fairly young group. And you're now, if we think about the Giants' philosophy here, I think, and what a lot of people are also thinking, is that the Giants are trying to go or move rather back to what made them so good in the late 2010s, or sorry, early 2010s, late 2000s of just having a dominant defensive line. And I'm not against that philosophy. And we're talking about positions of need here. I mean, the Jackson Dart pick was a position of need. The Marcus Imbaugh pick at number 154, definitely a position of need. A great steal there, upgrading or potentially upgrading their offensive line, and also Cam Skattebo. I mean, the Giants, Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy had a really good rookie season. That's one of the weakest running back duos in football. So I think I just named three picks right there. Jackson Dart, Cam Skattebo, Marcus Imbaugh. I think all three of those are positions of need. And also the tight end they drafted, Thomas Fidone out of Nebraska. Can you name more than one tight end on the Giants? I'm not sure I can. I can because I follow football, but it's like the whole not getting positions of need, just because they added two defensive linemen, I wouldn't say they didn't address their positions of need. The meme has been draft the best value available, but when their drives stall and their O line gives up yet another sack after not getting any explosive plays due to lack of receivers and running backs, not being able to build up any speed before being contacted, none of it will matter. Now, so what he's saying here is that he did not feel like they addressed the offensive line enough. And overall, these defensive picks are not going to solve their underlying offensive struggles. I can't disagree with that. Had issues with their offensive line for literally the better part of a decade now. When was the last time the Giants have an offensive line, or sorry, have had a good offensive line? I'm not sure I've ever seen it. Now, with that being said here, what would you have suggested they did? Would you have suggested them drafting Will Campbell over Abdul Carter? That would have been shocking. And you would have had to play him outside of his natural position of left tackle because you already got Andrew Thomas at left tackle. Well, let's break it down here. While the Giants, yes, they do not have a good offensive line on paper, Andrew Thomas missed a lot of time last season. Him coming back and bring presumably healthy would be a massive upgrade just in and of itself to the offensive line. John Michael Schmitz was not good last year, but he took massive, massive leaps from his rookie season to his sophomore season last year. I expect him to move forward accordingly. Jermaine Elemander, He's an above average pass protector, obviously not a good right tackle, but I wouldn't say he hurts a team. The guards obviously are extremely weak. One of the weakest guard duos in the NFL between John Runyon and Greg Van Roten. On the day I'm recording this, I think the day before, John Runyon had a picture of him being dragged away after getting slumped out cold during a practice. So obviously that's an issue. But you drafted Marcus Mbow, like I said, he could potentially take over by the end of the season at one of those guard positions. So I do feel like they addressed this offensive line. I'm also shocked that they did not draft a receiver, which I mentioned earlier, but they did draft a tight end. I just so the reason he made this comment overall, I think, is that he is not as high on the Giants draft as some other people are. And, consistently a lot of people call the Giants draft one of, if not the best drafts in the entire NFC. And I agree with that. I gave the Giants an A plus, two A's, an A minus, a B plus, and a C plus. So when you get four really, really good picks the Giants made, you get great value down the board with Darius Alexander, Cam Scatterbu, Marcus Mbow. I cannot say that the Giants draft was anything worse than very good. And while they still may have offensive line and overall just offensive issues next season, I feel like they have made a conscious effort to put themselves in a position to have a dominant defensive line. So that's just, I guess, the difference in opinion right there between that statement. Moving on to this next comment. You are way too hot. This is in regards to my AFC East draft. Sorry, or draft grades rather. Let me scroll over. So I took some copious notes here in preparation for this video. I came prepared. Get over to the AFC East. Give me 1 second. Okay. You are way too high on the Jets draft, and I'm speaking as someone who is probably higher on Fields than Glenn ever will be. Well, let's break that quick statement down. So you're higher on Justin Fields than Aaron Glenn is. I'm not so certain about that. Aaron Glenn, and I'm sure the management picked Justin Fields among various options. They could have went and got Kirk Cousins. They could have made a trade for Sam Darnold. There were several quarterbacks. Geno Smith, for example. There were several quarterbacks available on the market. I'm not saying the Jets chose Justin Fields over all of those guys, but to say the Jets and especially Aaron Glenn are not high on Justin Fields, I'm not so sure about that. But what he is saying that he is very high on Justin Fields, as am I. Um, let's break it down further. While I think his QB deserves some of the blame for his drops, Arian Smith, who's the Smith he's referring to here, was the only player on his team with that high of a drop rate. Now, I feel like every single receiver on Georgia's entire roster had a, country high drop rate, but he is referring to something that I absolutely agree with, that Arian Smith has major red flag drop concerns. I cannot disagree with that. Let's continue with the statement. Someone noticed a flaw in the CB Thomas, Azariah Thomas as well, and it's huge. His initial moves against receivers is elite, then his attention rather seems to stop, and he loses them completely. So he started off with Arian Smith. Let's go player by player here. He started off with breaking down why he didn't like the Arian Smith selection. By the way, number 110 overall. And also, by the way, I said that the Arian Smith pick was the worst of their entire draft. So if you're trying to argue that I should have been more harsh on the Arian Smith pick, I was very harsh, I feel like. I gave it a B minus. I said it was their worst pick overall. The only saving grace here is that he's an athletic freak. Say whatever you want about Arian Smith. He has bricks for hands, he can't catch, whatever. He is an athletic phenom. And if he can ever overcome these drop issues, his potential is through the roof just because of how exceptional of an athlete he is. And I gave it a B minus. I mean, if a team drafts a player at a position of need, a B minus is like the bare minimum that I can give it. It's not like they spent a second round pick on the guy. It's number 110 overall. What's that, like a fourth? So it's just a fourth or a fifth. I cannot criticize a fifth round pick that heavily. You know what I mean? Moving on here to what he said about Azariah Thomas. Azariah Thomas was their number 73 overall selection. So I believe they got him towards the top of the third round. The consensus on the Azariah Thomas pick, from what I've seen, is that was really good value. Also, keep in mind the Jets pretty much had to draft a cornerback because they lost DJ Reed in free agency. They did not bring back an adequate level replacement. So Jets definitely had to draft a cornerback, and depending on who you ask, Azariah Thomas might have been the best available. Now, what you're saying about His initial moves against receivers are elite, then his attention seems to drop and he loses them completely. I cannot verify or deny that claim. I have not gone into in-depth cornerback tape study of Azariah Thomas. You got me. So you could be right. I'll believe you when you say that. However, it was widely agreed upon by people who know more than me and probably know more than you that he was a late second round, third round caliber player. That's where the Jets drafted him. Now, if they spent a first round pick on him or a high end second round pick, then maybe I would have judged that more harshly. But I gave the pick an A minus, and I also said it was their steal of the draft. I don't think either of those two statements are inherently false. So my only problem with the pick, if you will, is that they drafted him over Shavon Riffle, who I'd had much higher than Azariah Thomas on my board. So, uh, yeah, I'm not going to say that you're wrong in what you said about him, but to say that Azariah Thomas should be lower than an A minus, I mean, maybe like you can give it a B plus, but I couldn't really drop that pick any lower than a B plus, in my opinion. Let's move on to the next part of his statement about Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor falls forward after making catches that he make look like the ball weighs 75 pounds. Man, no yards after catch. Well, he just ripped apart Mason Thomas right there. Rest in peace. But sorry, Mason Taylor rather. So that statement in particular, again, listen, and I've watched several LSU games over the last 2 seasons. I never looked at Mason Taylor and thought NFL tight end. That's just my opinion. But, the Jets spent a second round pick on him, number 42 overall. Does that seem like a really high pick to spend on Mason Taylor? Yes, it does. However, the Jets had a gaping, and I mean gaping hole at their tight end position. They had Tyler Conklin there for the last couple of years. I mean, all respect to Tyler Conklin. That's a massive just hole in your offense overall. And they even lose him. So now they're just desperately trying to find anybody who can play tight end for. They draft one in the second round. Would I have rather had guys like Elijah Arroyo or who else is available at 42? Was the guy from Terrence Ferguson here available? Would I have rather had those guys? Yeah, probably. Maybe even Harold Fannin in the third round. So would I have switched it around? Would I maybe have drafted a cornerback if I was the Jets at number 42? Yeah, and then drafted a tight end at 73. I think that's the route I would have gone. However, I gave the Mason Taylor pick an A minus, and I gave the Azariah pick or Azariah Thomas pick an A minus. Could you maybe convince me of like a B and a B plus? That's possible. And also, I'm not going to argue with that if you are slightly lower on both those picks than I am. But I try and be fairly optimistic when I look at these players and these picks overall. Moving on to the next part of his statement. Someone did say that all their picks were from the SEC teams. He doesn't follow college football that much, but the highest conference or whatever. Yes. Well, yes and no. All of their picks are from major conferences. They had one, two, three, four from the SEC, and then three from the ACC. So they drafted major conference players. Yes, all big, like recognizable names. The next part of his statement that makes Smith's drops less somehow. No. So he's trying to say that because Arian Smith played in the SEC, does that lessen the impact of his drops? No, they don't. And I agree with that statement. There is no skirting around the subject of Arian Smith having major, red flag level drop issues. That's the big thing about him. He can't catch the ball and he plays wide receiver. But also, you spend a fifth round pick on him. Are there other receivers out of drafted there? Yes, sure, absolutely. But to make it seem like Arian Smith just can't play the game of football, that's just not true. Does he have major red flags? Yes. Could he potentially overcome them and be a good receiver? Yes. We just have to wait and see. Next up, then Dolphins seem to be like the Saints and that they need to rebuild, but not everybody in the building agrees. I absolutely agree with this statement in regards to the Dolphins. The Dolphins seem like they're like a boat in the middle of the ocean with a bunch of holes. They're taking in water fast, but they still think that they can make it to land, 100 miles away. It's not happening. It's only a matter of time before the Dolphins absolutely collapse and blow up. And just the way the team is managed and the general manager, it doesn't even feel like he believes in the Dolphins' chances. They made a move for Jalen Ramsey a couple years ago. He's still an elite corner playing at a very high level. He wants to get rid of Jalen Ramsey. Jonnu Smith, they bring in Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith has a near all-pro level season. Not even a near all. He has an all-pro level season last year for a tight end. They want to get rid of Jonnu Smith. If you're a general manager and you have players and you think your team can win a Super Bowl, why the hell are you trying to get rid of some of your best players on offense and defense? So absolutely, I agree with what this guy is saying. The Dolphins seem to be all over the place in terms of alignment and what the general manager thinks, and the head coach, and all this, and all. And by the way, if their quarterback suffers one more concussion, he's like pretty much done with his NFL career. So the Dolphins are a sinking ship, absolutely. And I also agree that if they could this is the thing. I don't think anybody in their right mind would trade anything to get Tua just because of the injury concerns that come along with him. But yeah, I do think that they are going to be the Saints pretty much for as long as they continue to have Tua and Mike McDaniels and they don't decide to just blow it up. Because as long as Tua's healthy, relatively healthy, if he plays 12 games a season, they'll probably win 8, 9 games, right? But if he, it's just the Dolphin situation. I agree with what you're saying. It's a mess. Tua isn't a bust, but I would have offered him much less, and to what anyone else would offer him. Now their hands are tied. Agreed. The Tua contract is much more than he's worth. However, he's a very good player when he's out there and he's healthy and he wins a lot of games. That's the counter argument is that he works very well with Mike McDaniels. They're the best offense in the NFL when Tua's healthy, but he can't stay healthy. He has massive career-threatening injury concerns, and the GM and the coach don't seem to be aligned on the same issues. So absolutely, positively agree with that last part of this comment in regards to the Dolphins. Now, moving on to the Patriots, I suppose. TreVeyon Henderson is being undervalued for the same reason many really bad QBs are being overvalued. Expectations. Once they're set, they're hard to uproot. Jahmyr Gibbs isn't getting the unconditional praise he deserves without any reluctance because people only expect one great running back per year maximum, and Bijan was it. So it's funny to hear people praise Gibbs with a look of pain on their faces. That's a really interesting paragraph right there. So it starts off with TreVeyon Henderson being underrated, which I agree with. But then he tries to explain that by saying that people only expect one running back or one good running back per draft class. And while I think I saw a little bit of that this year in terms of people saying it's Ashton Jeanty and then everybody else, it's kind of true in that he was levels above the rest of the running back class, but the rest of the running back class was so incredibly talented. This the this second part of your statement, you're saying that Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't get unconditional praise he deserves. I don't really get that. I don't. Maybe we dwell in different parts of the NFL world, but I live in Atlanta and I still hear people talk about Jahmyr Gibbs more than I hear people talk about Bijan Robinson. I actually would say it's flipped. I actually think Jahmyr Gibbs gets way more praise and credit than Bijan Robinson does. I feel like if you ask most people, they would say Jahmyr Gibbs is the best running back from that draft class. Now, him and Bijan are both amazing, generational, all pro level talents, but I'm not hearing the same stuff that you might be hearing in regard to those two players. If anything, I think the main stuff that people hold against Jahmyr Gibbs is that he doesn't play enough. People think he should play more. People think that David Montgomery should get tossed aside and Jahmyr Gibbs should get, 85, 90% of the snaps. So I think we're kind of not aligned in those two statements right there. Now, the next part of the statement. Now, great as the Pats did, an O line is only as strong as its weakest player. I do not agree with that. I think you can have a bad, or let me say, an average offensive lineman, and the rest of the guys around him be good. And on tape, he looks much better by comparison. I do not agree with the statement. An O line is only as strong as his weakest player. That's just not true. If you have four Pro Bowl or All Pro caliber offensive linemen, and let me just pick a random. I got a whole list of offensive linemen here. If you pick Spencer Brown, right tackle for the Bills, he's a solid player. But if you put him on the Eagles' offensive line and the rest of the guys around him are good, you might look at Spencer Brown as a Pro Bowl level player instead of a above average level guy. So yeah, I don't agree with that statement that your offensive line rather is only as strong as his weakest player. Moving on. Despite being a huge Kyle Williams fan, I think he is the wrong fit for this year's Pats. I agree with that statement. I also like Kyle Williams. I think he's a really exciting player to watch. But I feel like the Patriots have so many talented young receivers that they are now condemning at least two of them to fail via the moves they made in the draft and the moves they made in free agency. After adding Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins, I have no idea why they added Matt Collins, by the way. I hate that signing. But after adding Matt Collins and Stephon Diggs, why would you draft a receiver? You have three young receivers on your team already. I think four, actually. Kayshon Boutte, Demario Douglas, um, Jalen Polk, and Javon Baker. Now, a lot of people just say throw Javon Baker and Jalen Polk to the wayside, which I think is just a massive waste of a second round pick from last season to just kick Jalen Polk off the team because of a bad rookie season. A lot of people still give Quentin Johnson a lot of shit, but look at the jump he made from year one to year two. You're just going to act like Jalen Polk isn't capable of the same thing when he had Jacoby Brissett throwing to him for the majority of the season. I just I hate that philosophy by the Patriots. They're just going to give up on multiple young receivers when you don't have to. And this also hurts Kyle Williams. He's now fighting with five other young guys trying to get, playing time. So I agree with you. I just don't think it's the right fit. I would like to see Kyle Williams go somewhere where he has a little bit more opportunity and just other young guys rather don't get so negatively affected. It won't matter to Myles Garrett if he sacks May through the left guard or right tackle. And for May, having nearly always immediately open T-Mac to throw to within the first point 6 seconds would be ideal. So he's saying he would have rather the Patriots drafted Tedero McMillan instead of Will Campbell. I and other people toyed with this idea as well throughout the draft process. However, ultimately, I decided that drafting Will Campbell just makes the most sense for the Patriots. The offensive line was a massive issue last year. He's not wrong about that, but you also have to make a conscious effort to try, at least try, and protect Drake May going forward. Let's talk about the Patriots offensive line. And I think he is lower on the Patriots offensive line than I am. Now listen, Will Campbell, starting left tackle, who knows how good he's going to be as a rookie. It's very fair to assume he's going to be below average. If Will Campbell is an average left tackle, I feel like you're going to be happy with that as a rookie. That is. The rest of the offensive line, Cole Strange, he dealt with injuries last year, but in 2023, he was above average as a left guard. He comes back next season. Garrett Bradbury, you bring him in via free agency. He was pretty bad last year on the Vikings, to be honest. He was terrible in pass protection. But you also draft Jared Wilson in the third round. So you have pretty much a guarantee of above average center play because if Garrett Bradbury isn't getting it done, then you plug in Jared Wilson. You have two options there at center. Mike Onwenu was probably their best offensive lineman from last year. He was an above average right guard, a good pass protector. So he comes back at right guard. And then you bring in Morgan Moses from the Jets. He was he was definitely above average in pass protection last year for the Jets, only allowed 2 sacks. That's a major upgrade at right tackle. So, regardless of what you think about the Patriots, they made major upgrades to the offensive line, both in free agency and through the draft. So, I think he's lower on them than I would be. Let's move on with this statement. I'd love for the Panthers, Jets, and Pats to realize that they all have a wide receiver who would suit the other team better and just trade Arian Smith, Tedero McMillan, and Kyle Williams. I'm not I'm not really understanding that. Kyle Williams is an immense distraction to have on a team with one other elite receiver where they can't adequately cover both and stop the run. This only works if Kyle Williams has the time to threaten at all three levels of the field. And between the Pats' offensive line and lack of other receiving threats, I don't think he'll get that time. Not really sure what he was saying here with this last paragraph, if you will, but so he really doesn't like Arian Smith, and I guess he doesn't like the fits of Tedro McMillan on the Panthers and Kyle Williams on the Patriots. Like I said, I think he's underrating the Patriots' offensive line a little bit, and but I do agree with him that I wish Kyle Williams would have went to another team. So that's it for this slide of comment. There's more. This might be a longer video. I am taking my time to adequately respond to all of his points and all of these comments. Now, next up, let me click next. There we go. Okay. This is the NFC West. Start from right to left. This is the NFC West draft grades video. Thanks for what seems to be the best assessment of the 49ers and Rams draft so far. Thank you. Aside from the Eagles, the Rams have been a top 5 team in how they've drafted in the recent past. I would agree with that, especially considering how few of the picks that they've had overall. I mean, by the way, the Rams built an elite defensive line through the draft in 2 years. They hit consecutively on all 4 of their picks: Byron Young, Jared Verse, Colby Turner, and Braden Fisk. They hit on all 4 of those guys in just 2 years, and now they have an elite defensive line, all on rookie contracts. The Rams should get a ton of credit for how they did the last 2 years in the draft. Now, he said, not this year. I agree with that. I also criticized the Rams draft very heavily this year. Yeah, a running back is far away, not a need. Unless they know something we don't, they just seem to shrug and give up. They try and make it look like they hadn't. Not a huge deal if you ask me. Uh, the point you made about Shedeur is a great one, and they have no post Stafford plan. So he is talking about here how I criticized heavily the Jarquez Hunter pick that they made, and I believe it was the 4th round. And the reason I criticized that so heavily, 2 parts. One of which The Rams are a team where they have a bell cow running back. Like they're one of the few teams where they have a number one running back and he gets the wide majority of the touches. Kyron Williams, if you look at the numbers, he got the overwhelming majority of snaps and touches last year for the Rams. And they drafted a running back in the third round last year, Blake Corum. You remember him, the all-world Michigan running back from last season? They drafted him in the third round, and he got next to no opportunity last year because one, Kyron Williams is so good, and two, they don't give other people a chance just because they play the best player as long as they're healthy. And so they have two running backs, presumably, that would overwhelmingly like they don't have an RB3 like that gets any number of like even close to the amount of touches as Kyron Williams or Blake Corum. So drafting an RB3 in the fourth round makes no sense for a team like the Rams, where their top two running backs get 100% of the touches. They're drafting insurance at the running back position when you could have drafted your future quarterback in Shedeur Sanders. It makes no sense to me. The Rams next season are not going to have the opportunity to draft a guy in the fourth round who could be your potential franchise quarterback. And on top of that, just think of the guys that Sean McVay has had success with. Pocket passing quarterbacks. Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford. Say what you want about Shedeur Sanders. He fits right in that mold. So I don't understand why you would pass on Shedeur Sanders in the fourth round and draft a guy instead who will do nothing for you next season unless multiple guys ahead of him get hurt. So I hated the Jarquez Hunter pick. Looking back on it, I could have given that an F, to be honest with you. Looking back at the comment here, the problem is Shadeur's agent. His dad is a college head coach who also assesses talent. What current head coach or GM would want to invite a guy their current employer will be thinking, I can sell more season tickets if I hire this guy, into meetings with their employer? It feels to me that McVay is becoming more and more short sighted in his objectives, and he's not thinking clearly. Well, in one aspect, you could say that Sean McVay should become more short-sighted because this could be Matthew Stafford's last year, and he should be looking to put as much talent around Stafford as possible in his final season. Because who knows? I mean, nobody knows what their plan after that is at the quarterback position. So, in that aspect, I would agree that he's becoming more short-sighted, but he also should be. He's not thinking clearly. I mean, I wouldn't say McVay's not thinking clearly. I mean, just one pick doesn't mean that they just they're a terrible team. I am kind of surprised that they would trade. Remember, their first round pick, they traded out of that. Now they got an extra first round pick from the Falcons to move out of that spot, but you would think a team, trying to build a team around Matthew Stafford would, just stick and pick in the first round and get a real good player there. But they seem to not be going all in, which is interesting to me that they wouldn't draft Shedeur Sanders under that scenario. So yeah, that's what I think about that overall. Moving on. T Mac seemed, I think this is about the NFC South video. T Mac seemed like a fit to people who judge Bryce Young on his looks, size, and can't dislodge their head from their preconceived notions. Most people. So he's not liking the fit of Tedero McMillan to the Panthers. I was saying this for months and months, and I never really got off of this. A lot of people got off the T Mac train to Carolina, and they started mocking them to take a bunch of defensive players. I was never on that train. I looked at the second half of the season that Bryce Young had, especially his final game against the Falcons. I mean, he had the best game of his career in Week 18 versus the Falcons. I looked at that and I saw, you know what, Bryce is moving in the right direction. Let's bring in a true number one receiver for him via the draft. So I love that pick, and he's not liking the fit as much. I'm not sure exactly why, based on this assessment. He's saying that most people kind of discredit Bryce Young based on his size. I don't disagree with that, but what does that have to do with Tedero McMillan? In college, his favorite target was a deep threat, and last year he was first or second in average depth of target. Despite appearances, his strength is his long pass. I agree with everything he's saying. Bryce Young definitely has a good deep ball, and most people wouldn't assume that about him. This is not the right fit for them, but I'm not sure who would be. What? So if you don't like the T Mac selection, how can you not offer up an alternative? There were no deep threat receivers in this draft who didn't have off the field or drop issues. Well, then how do you not like the pick then? The whole point about a pick is drafting the best guy of the available options. That's what they did with. That's why I gave it such a high draft grade. I'm not saying T Mac is a generational blue chip level receiver here, but out of a relatively weak receiver class, he was the best available option in my opinion. That's why I was so happy with the pick. So if you're saying you're not happy with the pick, but you can't think of a good alternative, that means it's a good pick. I mean, am I missing something here? Leggett has drop issues, and Thielen is finally to live down to what everybody thought he would be in 2022. Too old and slow. I mean, brother, way to just rip apart Adam Thielen here. I actually think Thielen has a little bit of gas left in the tank. I mean, the last 2 seasons, Adam Thielen, he has actually been pretty good for the Panthers and especially for Bryce Young. I think without Adam Thielen, Bryce Young, he might not be in the league right now. That's how terrible the Panthers would be without Adam Thielen the last 2 years. He made highlight reel grabs last year while looking so stiff. I was worried he'd tear something every time he made one. Brother, this guy has a personal vendetta against Adam. He is just destroying poor old Adam Thielen. They need a new deep threat. They got one though. That's why I'm not understanding why you don't like the T Mac pick. I mean, ask around. The consensus was that of all the people, if you polled everybody, T Mac would be the number one pure wide receiver in the draft. So I'm not understanding why he doesn't like the pick. He couldn't even explain. He said he's not a great fit, but I can't think of anybody else who would who would be better than him. So that makes it a good pick. I'm sorry, I'm not understanding this comment of why you don't like T Mac. Um, Moving on, this is again about the NFC West, I believe. Of course, your bias shows. So me talking about being a biased Seahawks fan. You're glazing the Cardinals draft so that when they look bad at any point in the season, you'll be able to say they had no excuse. Not at all. Listen. You're giving me way too much credit here. You're assuming that I'm going to play several month long mind games here just to spite the Cardinals, brother. With all due respect, I do not care about the Cardinals that much. They are the little brother in the NFC West. They're the punching bag. The Seahawks have dominated them for the better part of 15 years at this point. All due respect, I do not. The Cardinals don't concern me that much to play these mind games for this long. But no, in all seriousness, I really like the Cardinals draft. I would argue between the Walter Nolan pick and the Will Johnson pick, those might be the best first two picks that any team made in the entire draft. Seriously, the Cardinals, especially at the top of their draft, was incredible. There is no hidden agenda for me talking about how good the Cardinals draft was. It is simply that I think they had a really good draft, especially at the top. They vastly improved this defense for the future with those top two picks. Okay, seriously, I don't think that the Seahawks really think Milrow can be a potential franchise QB and wait until the third round to draft him. Now, he may have a point there. I mean, the Seahawks had 3 picks in the top 50, right? Well, top 52. They spent their first round pick on an offensive tackle. Obviously, I love that pick. They traded up with their second round pick to get Nick Emanwari at the top of the second round. I love that pick as well. And then you could make a strong case, right? If the Seahawks really thought that Milrow could be a high level guy, then they probably would have drafted him right at 52. And said they drafted Elijah Arroyo. Now, listen. Actually, I think it was number 50 they drafted Arroyo. But anyways, I agree the Seahawks probably didn't have that high of a grade. I think they probably had a mid to second round or a mid to late second round grade on Jalen Milrow, which is the exact same that I had. But I also think they wouldn't even have been looking at quarterback all that heavy because they made the move to get Sam Darnold and they're confident in Sam Darnold. Now, with that being said, I think when they got to it was like, by the way, this is a late third round pick they spent on Jalen Milrow. It's not like they are not like really investing heavily in him. With all due respect, like we don't need Jalen Milrow to be anything. If Jalen Milrow fizzles out and never plays a single snap for the Seahawks, it won't hurt us at all. Now listen, there are several really good players that we passed on in order to draft Jalen Milrow. For example, let me pull up. It was somebody like a couple picks afterwards that I would have loved to have the Seahawks draft instead of Jalen Milrow. But let me just quickly pull that up for you guys so you know what I'm talking about here. Third round, late 90s, we passed up on Jared Wilson, the amazing number one overall center out of Georgia. If we would have drafted, this is the thing. This is what proves to me that they're high on Jalen Milrow. For us to pass up on potentially the consensus number one center in the entire draft to draft Jalen Milrow, that tells me the Seahawks are very high on him. So while yes, at the end of the day, you spent a third round pick on him, you drafted him over other players at positions of need, really good players. So you can say, the Seahawks don't think he can be a potential franchise quarterback. I don't think anybody really thinks that, though. We have Sam Darnold. He is the guy until proven otherwise. So you're taking a shot on a guy who has real, special, um, off or athletic potential, and anything else, who cares, right? I just I feel like he's kind of overplaying the importance of the Jalen Merrill pick, but I like it just simply based off the potential, right? Moving on. Riley, and he's talking about what's his name? The Riley Mills, the defensive tackle we took. Feels like that stupid thing many teams do where they pick one guy they think only a little better than the consensus that they feel they have to draft him and prove it. Not really sure what you mean by that, but I also did think that Riley Mills was the worst pick that the Seahawks made overall. I hated it. We didn't need defensive line, and I don't know why we spent that pick on a defensive lineman. Moving on, and while yeah, Zabel is a great pick, why'd they stop there? They still need more offensive line. Well, we did stop there. I mean, we did draft two offensive linemen in the sixth and seventh round. Now, you could make the argument that, well, sixth, seventh round, if you're drafting linemen in the sixth, seventh round, then you could make the argument you're not really investing in the offensive line. The guys in the sixth, seventh round, they're not really expected to come in and be stars or anything like that. And I would agree with you. However, to say we stopped there, we didn't. We spent two more picks investing in the offensive line, and we spent three picks. How many? Show me a list. If you showed me a list of teams who spent at least three picks on offensive linemen, it would not be a big list. The Seahawks would be up there. So to say we didn't invest in the offensive line is not true. We spent our first round pick on offensive linemen, and we drafted two more in the later rounds. I would say overall we spent a higher amount of investment on offensive line than hardly any other team in the NFL. So I disagree with that statement over there. The implied statement that we did not spend enough capital on the offensive line. I disagree with that. I think we did. So those are these three comments over here. Moving on. We only got one big one left, and then we got a funny one. Now, this is in regards to my top five quarterbacks video that I made, where I ranked, I think my order was Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts at five, Jared Goff at six. Did I have Baker at seven? I don't know who I had at seven, but then everybody else. Um, well, we have very different criteria for this. Who has the mostest, bestest skills that can benefit any team is how I think of the best. Okay. Why our team wins 100% the quarterback? I don't think that I never said that. 2 years ago, the Ravens OC and head coach admitted that they had no idea what plays to call, so they just called RPOs or QB's choice or abandoned Lamar in his time of need and gave him zero support in a playoff game against Reed, Mahomes, Spags, and the Chiefs. I'm really not sure what he's referring to here. 2 years ago, was that the that was the AFC Championship game, right? So 2 years ago against Mahomes and the Chiefs, they said they didn't know what plays to call. I'm not familiar with that. I'm not gonna. I believe you. I'm not saying you're a liar. I've never heard of that before. And he almost won. And a zillion more exclamation points will not make anyone understand this because, and this isn't an intelligence thing. Every NFL fan I've ever met has the impression that they always fall back on that play calling affects at most 5% of some games. That's all. I thoroughly disagree with play calling. Obviously, is massive here. I mean, it can either be something that makes the quarterback's life easy, or it could be something that they have to completely overcome. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's wrong, but I feel like a lot of fans understand that it's more than 5%. I mean, maybe I don't I don't know what spaces this guy lives in where every fan around him is just brain dead. But I just I'm not if that's the truth, and that sucks to you got a fan you got to find new people to talk football with. But yeah, I don't agree with that. Last year, Russ ignored Arthur Smith, called audibles, and threw passes Smith refused to allow him to throw before and after that game, and added what 35 to 40% more passing yards to their offense. For 3 years, Lamar had Greg Roman calling his passing plays, and the year before, in 2019, the passing plays were called by somebody else. And 2 years after, when he didn't, Lamar had two times the touchdowns and half the interceptions. Well, I agree that Greg Roman was probably a bad offensive coordinator. But also those 2 years you're referring to, did Lamar not get hurt? He missed like a quarter of the season in like 2 out of 3 years there. So if I'm thinking about this correctly, 2019 he was healthy, 23, 24 he was healthy. So 20, 21, 22, I think it was 21 and 22 or 20 and 22. He missed a lot of time in between that. So I don't know how much of that is him being hurt or the change in play calling there. So we have hard evidence that play calling can affect at least 50% of games right there. So when I say Lamar was hung out to dry by his own coaches in a playoff game against the Chiefs and he almost won, that right there should be bigger than any current QB has ever done. A QB doesn't have time to look at the design of the defense that they're throwing against and call plays designed to counter it. Well, so the whole argument here, the whole reason for this comment is that I'm assuming he wants Lamar ahead of Josh Allen. And I went back and forth. I mean, I truly grappled with the thought of who is the second best quarterback in football. And honestly, there is no wrong answer. If I talk to somebody and they have Lamar Jackson, the number two quarterback, I will not debate them. If they had Josh Allen number two, I will not debate them. They are both great players. And neither of them have made a Super Bowl. Neither of them have beat Mahomes in the playoffs. This guy is saying that Lamar came very, very close, and I agree with that. And also keep in mind, Lamar, I mean, say what you want. Lamar has had offensive players let him down in playoff games. I mean, you had Zay Flowers fumbling at the goal line in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. Would that have turned the tide? Would that have won the Ravens the game? Who knows? But that's an offensive player letting Lamar down. Last year against the Bills, the Mark Andrews drop that would have sent the game to overtime. The other Mark Andrews drop in just earlier in that game. Like Lamar has had people let him down in big playoff games. I'm not denying that. There's a strong case. Like I'm not honestly. I think I said this in the video. I'm not gonna make a case. Maybe I should have just put them even. But if I had to pick one based on the numbers and based really what I based my thing for Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson is that Lamar has missed a lot of time. Not the last two seasons, but before that, in like 2022 and 2020, I think. He missed a lot of time and therefore he missed an entire playoff run. So it's just Josh Allen has more of a sample size. And considering the fact that neither of them have ever beat Mahomes or ever made a Super Bowl, it's just they're both in the same boat for my opinion. So I had to pick the guy who had more, given the fact that neither of them have ever reached the pinnacle, right? Um, Next up, in the final part of the statement, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow do not ever call their own plays. The QBs with the skills that can succeed more in more different circumstances are the best. I don't disagree with that. Is he saying that Lamar is better than Patrick Mahomes? Because there is no argument in my opinion that you can say anybody is better than Patrick Mahomes. But he's saying that Lamar is the best, I guess, because he's able to succeed in more different circumstances. I don't disagree with that, man. It's like if you say Lamar is better than Josh Allen, I'm not going to do. But I also had him better than Joe Burrow, so I don't know what you even mentioning Joe Burrow there for. Um, Hurts has no business whatsoever being in this discussion, doing so little with so much. Oh no, 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 no. We do not tolerate Jalen Hurts slander on this page, man. Listen, I clearly said that there is a top four and then everybody else, but I did have Jalen Hurts at the top of the everybody else because we got a guy who has a Super Bowl performance in which he played very well, won the Super Bowl, and also a Super Bowl performance where he played great. He played great in the 2022 Super Bowl and lost. So it's just like, man, doing so little with so much. You call two NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl win, doing so little. I cannot agree with that whatsoever. Please show me any quarterback outside the top four stack their resume among or against Jalen Hurts, especially in the playoff performances, you will be severely disappointed, brother. I absolutely think Jalen Hurts is a tier above everybody else outside of that top four. Moving on to the final overall statement here after addressing and breaking down every one of Choose Carefully's points. Again, I want to say thank you for going through, watching all these videos, leaving all these comments. I really did want to take my time to break down and respond thoroughly to each and every one of them. This was funny, that's why I put this at the end. Just a side note, I'll delete this after you respond to it. Well, I recorded the video, so it's here forever. Not me, obviously, but potentially a lot of people are going to look at your setup and not click based on just that. You look like you moved up from your mother's basement all the way to her living room. Is there is there anything you can do about that? Well, I am in the basement, so there's no denying that fact. I actually did switch the setup up. Moving forward, this might actually be the new setup. I don't know if you like it or don't like it. It's just a blank wall behind me. Um, so I don't. This guy said he didn't watch my older videos. It's actually funny. You look like you moved from your mother's basement all the way to her living room. My old videos used to be upstairs in my room, but the lighting was terrible. I just didn't think they looked good. I moved to the basement where I think the lighting and the setup looked better. Now I'm still in the basement in a different room, um, because I think just the lighting in the background. I mean, I think it looks the best. But I mean, is there anything I can do about that? I mean, unless I go to a whole new location, but this is pretty much the best as it gets. If I remain in my house, this is the best you're going to see right here. But I don't know. This guy really had to hammer home the fact that my production quality was terrible. And I'm listen, I'm not disagreeing with you there. But these videos are brought to you by nobody. There is no sponsorships. This is done on a budget here. So if you don't like the quality of the videos, I mean, this is about this. I mean, this is about as good as it gets right here. I'm sorry, but I just this was fun. I wanted to put this at the end. Hey, I appreciate the positive, the constructive criticism here. He's really trying to give me some advice on the production quality of my videos here. But can you really see it though? In the people are said that he said that people are not going to click based on that. You can't see how low quality it is until you click on the video though. So I mean, as long as you click, I don't care. I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, I would like for you to watch the whole video, but if man, look, if you are so off put, man, by the production quality, at least listen to what I have to say, man. Don't just click off because I look broke, man. That's hey, man. Again, I appreciate you. Choose carefully. Um, I've never made a video like this, just where I just break down and respond to a bunch of comments. But I mean, hey, it was an interesting discussion. I enjoyed making this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and we will be continuing with ranking all 32 teams very soon here. So I will see you all in the next one. Peace.